Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope yours are well. We've called this week's podcast The Final Betrayal, because that's what it is, folks, the final betrayal. And we've got to come up with an alternative. But let's get the gang in before we get started. Over there in Edinburgh, we've got our Lloyd. Mr. Quinnan, welcome back. You have been missed by us all. We paid the ransom. It took us a while to raise the ransom.
Well, thanks for doing that. It's nice to be free again.
It's great to have you back. We've missed you. You've been greatly missed. And up there, we've got our favourite lawyer, of course, up in Clickmannon. Our Eva. Eva, my friend, how are you?
I'm suffering from some trauma today because I've just discovered this. My I'm with Nicola pen.
All right, well, I've got my SNP pen. I discovered that one.
But have you got this one? Stronger for Scotland.
No.
Aye.
Yeah.
Those were the days.
Remember when they were an independence party?
Not so long ago.
Aye, not so long ago, but it is. And over there in Brussels, he's sprouting on our screen. Do you like the way we did that, Brussels and Sprout? You see how good didn't it? Mr. Boswell, how are you?
Very, very well. Nobody likes Brussels sprouts except at Christmas, but I do. I do like them, done properly. And this is a cracking spot. I have to say I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Life is wonderful, and I know I'm very fortunate, so I won't rub it in too much. But thoroughly enjoying life, and we should, because we've only got one.
Indeed it is. But as I said right at the start of this, ladies and gentlemen, it's the final betrayal week. It's like lots of things happening. Now, on here, for several years now, we've been saying, no English Prime Minister again will ever agree to a Section 30. And they say, one more referendum, one more mandate, said the SNP. I'm telling you, they can't keep saying no. And lo and behold, this week, they started answering. The deputy leader of the SNP, Lloyd, he finally admitted he's giving us this news. In case you didn't know, folks, they will not give us another Section 30 order. Well, paint me pink and slap me down with a feather. Who knew?
Oh, here we are again, happy as can be. We've been getting softened up, Ronnie. That's all there is to it. The voters have been softened up. A harsher element has been taken against the actual membership of the party, and now we're coming to the light at the end of the tunnel. And the light for the likes of Keith and for John Swinney and for Kate Forbes is the final admission that they are the party of devolution, that independence is considerably more difficult and is beyond their abilities to deliver, because we live in a dangerous world. And these people that hang about with those from the British-American Partnership and other such organisations, such as the Privy Council, get told on a regular basis that it's all too difficult and don't go rocking the boat because we live in a dangerous world. It's absolutely incredible that the current leadership of the SNP does not have the courage to be honest and straightforward with the electorate. If they sincerely believe, and I believe that they do, that devolution is the maximum we can achieve at the moment under their leadership, then they need to be honest about it, and they need to be honest about it now. Either that, or they're going to fall between two stools when it comes to the 2026 election, and they will take a hammering from both sides and from the middle. And I cannot understand the blindness to that reality that currently is going on in the Scottish National Party. I mean, Kate Forbes' performance on debate night the other night, frankly, was astonishing. When asked a really simple question, which is, what would be the big difference 10 years on from Scotland becoming an independent country? And she could enumerate nothing whatsoever. All she said was, there would have been negotiations. We would have made arrangements with our partners and our friends over issues of security and defence. Not one idea of what would have happened during those 10 years other than negotiations. And that tells us everything we need to know about the current leadership of the Scottish National Party. They are managers, nothing more, and they are middle managers. They are not entrepreneurial managers. They are not visionary managers. They are not, dare I suggest it, even thinking managers.
I would use other words, but some children do watch this show. Although that's not to say that won't happen as the show goes on. Phil, they've finally admitted there will be no Section 30. Now, you and I, Eva, Lloyd, have discussed this so many times, saying it's not going to happen. Why are we going for it? We know they're not going to do it. And now, finally, at last, they're admitting what we've been telling them and we were getting attacked for by their followers for telling them the reality. There will never be another Section 30.
No, there certainly will not be. But the problem here is, as Lloyd has touched on, the sheep do what they are told. That's why, sadly, most of them need to be politically exterminated, i.e. removed from representing the people they purport to, because they don't. They are indeed shysters and chancers and troffers and not fit to represent us. Where's the backbone? All those who have been in since the Scottish election after Nicola took over need to be removed. They have not stood up. They have not voiced the opinions of the Scottish people. Instead, they just reflect the instructions from their masters, who are in turn managed by the British imperialist masters. For example, sponsor... And do you know, there's actually something here that people need to understand, in my opinion. Sponsors, patriarchs or matriarchs of a government group within any political party. These powerful individuals place other individuals that it controls and gains benefit from and gets payment from into positions of power. But then they get that by way of consultancy as advisors, or placing other chosen people or chosen ones by the governing shysters in positions of power. The mentors that we so admire in industry, in business, do it mostly for personal satisfaction of passing on knowledge and bringing on youngsters. In politics, the mentors do it mostly for personal gain. There are individuals who do it for the right reasons, but often they place individuals for personal gain to build their empire and continue to gain personally, financially, long after they've left office. I know supposed ministers, and that's the wrong word to use. They're not ministers, they're administrators in the Scottish Government who are products of this game and still look after the mentor who placed them there. That's why they're sheep. That's why there's no free thinking. That's why there's no standing up to the nonsense that is this philosophy, this not crap that Section 30 was ever going to happen. We know it's never going to happen. And that's why they're sheep, because they're talking nonsense. They lack a spine. When they say and they reiterate the glib sound bites of their masters and their masters' masters, they are worth investigating. And I'm an arbitrator, so I offer my services free to any forensic audit on any number of these shysters. Any day, square go, outside, you and me. Thank you very much.
I'm a bad head boy. I'll join them. Eva, not only have they at last come to realisation that the Section 30, which they've run on for the last 4 or 5 elections to get mandates on, was never going to happen. The minute we got to 45% in 2014 was never going to happen. But the thing is, the public are still pro everything. They're still going for it. The latest opinion poll this week, a lot of stuff came out this week, that 57% of people in Scotland, they still want a referendum, because it's all they've been told the only way there is to independence, because the SNP have not come up with an alternative. But there's only 32% against it. The 32% who are against it are all unionists. That's why they're against it, not for any other reason. And I believe that would be a nearer the score if we actually went for independence. It would be a 57-32.
I think you and that opinion poll are probably spot on, Roddy, because I found campaigning in the general election that there was a massive groundswell of support for independence. The problem was in the main that the SNP vote stayed at home. And they stayed at home because people could see there was no particular plan. There was also the question of the relative competence and the skills of the Scottish government too, because that clearly also had an impact. But what we see day in and day out is a desperate need in Scotland for self-determination and for control of our own resources for the good of our own people. I'll give you an example. This week, I've had 3 different cases for 3 entirely different, unrelated, unconnected families where they have young children who have each waited, in some cases, over 2.5 years, but most all of them over 2 years for an assessment appointment with the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service. That's the kind of thing that wouldn't be an issue where Scotland independent and where our priorities, bairns, not bombs, as is the case with Westminster meantime. So the issue about independence is that we need a people's movement and we need the politicians to listen to the will of the people, which is something that sadly the SNP have signally failed to do. Keith Brown, for example, as you know, he's my MSP. His elected political career began in 1996 when he was elected to what had been my ward that I used to represent on Clackmannan District Council. So he became a district councillor, he became the leader of the council, he actually ran Clackmannan Council very well. And then he became an MSP and subsequently had ministerial positions, including that of Justice Minister. However, a few years ago, at a time when I still trusted him, I asked him at a local SNP event, which was featuring speeches from himself and from Alan Smith, what was the position in the SNP within the higher echelons and in the leadership, and particularly Nicola Sturgeon? What was the line? Where were they taking us in the context of the battle to regain our country's independence? And he said, don't worry, Nicola's got a plan. And I sort of half laughed and said, well, can you tell me what it is? Because I don't see any evidence of it. And he said, don't worry, the plan's there. She's on it. She knows what she's doing. And I kind of knew then it wasn't very likely that we were going to see much of a plan that had really any potential for success, unless there was going to be something like a de facto referendum in the context of using a general election or a Scottish parliamentary election for that purpose. There was a wee bit of hope restored in January 20 when we had Nicola's announcement on Brexit Day that there would indeed be a constitutional convention, but nothing ever became of it.
No.
But we know now that that constitutional convention has become the carrot that's being dangled, because Keith Brown this week spoke about a constitutional convention, and he spoke about that too, I think, at the SNP conference. But the problem for the SNP is nobody believes them anymore. The emperor's clothes, it's that fable over and over again. They promise, or they overpromise, and they under-deliver, and they're doing it all the time to the extent that everybody sees it, including their own members and their own elected politicians. We've seen this obviously from those particularly who joined Alex Salmond last weekend at his event in Glasgow. We heard especially excoriating comments from Fergus Ewing. He was absolutely on the money. The SNP leadership have lost their way, and the way that Scotland will attain its independence is when and only when the leadership and the politicians are bent to the will of the people, and that is to have a de facto referendum, which is an election. And the greatest opportunity for that is Angus Brendan McNeill's position, the Alba position. It's the supermajority in the Scottish Parliament, and it could be an early Holyrood election. So I think you'd find it's the old phrase, build it and they will come. We had support for independence at around about 28% prior to the referendum, and we know in 2014 it went, the final vote, 45%, but at times probably popularity was higher than that. If you named a date for a Holyrood election, an early one, by collapsing the Parliament in the context of having a supermajority, a united position, and a driving force comprising representation of all types of parties and policies that seek independence, I'm pretty confident that 57% in that opinion poll would be the outcome and the result in favour of politicians who absolutely support independence at the earliest opportunity, and you use that vote as the springboard from which you negotiate the independence settlement.
Absolutely. I believe that too, but we'll come on to what the SNP reaction. Now, on that poll as well, there was two really important parts in it, Lloyd. One, which is the demographic, and that is that 63% of young Scots between the age of 18 and 35, those halcyon days, 63% of them believe in independence. But on the question, now remember when we started in 2014, we only had 28%. We haven't campaigned in 10 years. There's been nothing done to advance the cause. We've been battered and bruised. From the 19th of September 2014, the Unionists have been campaigning, talking down Scotland, attacking independence. And yet, here we are. A poll finds that over 50% still want independence. They've tagged on the bit, well, as long as you join the European Union, well, we'll be getting it after. But that's not the point. The point is that with no campaigning, with a total onslaught, the yes vote's still there, but there's no vehicle for us at the moment. That is the problem, Lloyd.
Yes, that is the problem, Roddy, because what has been clear for the past 10 years is that support for independence remains absolutely solid. And I would suggest that if there were a campaign, then that's going to climb in the same way as it did in 2014. But the other side of this is what you've just outlined is actually what scares the living death out of the leadership of the Scottish National Party and their headquarters staff, because they know that the situation is the people want something that they're scared to go and try and do. Now, whatever the reasons are for that, I think there are many. But the fact of the matter is, if a campaign was to begin, everything that Eva said is absolutely right. If we work on the basis of having an electoral event, an electoral mandate, let's get this. This was pointed out to me yesterday that it was in a question to Nicola Sturgeon that the de facto referendum concept became part of our parlance, when in reality it's not a de facto referendum, but we've all dragged ourselves into it. What it is, it's seeking an electoral mandate for independence, which is much more direct, because what you're effectively saying is the vote is a vote for independence in an election. Yeah? And that's the way we should be approaching this. But the current leadership of the Scottish National Party fear that, because what it requires is, it requires the backup to go with it, namely what you'll do after you win. And that's the thing that nothing has been done about for 10 years by these people. Nobody has thought about what do we do the day after. And that's where a lot of the fear comes in, because these are people that are elected that get called sir and ma'am on a daily basis by civil servants. They get glad-handed. They get their pictures in the paper. The newspapers and the television and the radio want to talk to them, and they think they're important. They only become important when they start delivering for the people, not delivering for themselves, and they've not been delivering. Again, I mentioned it earlier, the Kate Forbes' performance on debate night. She made a big issue about the fact that in 2014, she wasn't an important person. Does she think she's an important person now? That's absolutely ridiculous. Utterly and completely ridiculous. If you are either the Deputy First Minister, Deputy Leader of the Scottish National Party, you're in government in Scotland and you have not advanced the cause of independence by 1 inch, you're a failure. That's it. Nothing more.
Absolutely. That is the problem. They've got ideas way above their abilities, Phil. But we see that the public are there. We've witnessed it. We've felt it when we've been out talking to people in the streets. Unlike these Labour politicians, when I'm on the door, we actually do talk to people in the streets. And it's there. The will's there. We need that vehicle. Everything's in place except the political will.
Correct, 100%. And no vehicle is sadly really the point here, because Alba have not risen to where we hoped they would by now. ISP have also fallen by the wayside because we realise how difficult as Alex, I spoke to Alex about this a long time ago, and it's very, very difficult to start a new political party as the situation we see right now has proven. But no vehicle is sadly the case. A unified yes movement now requires the deconstruction and reconfiguration of the SNP or their complete abandonment. And if you're in the SNP and you're prepared to do that, to take the SNP to total destruction, for that is what is required, then you are my enemy. And you are the enemy of the Scottish people, and to hell with you. I mean, that's great stuff from Eva and Lloyd, as usual. These bellends like Kate Ford's need to be deconstructed politically. Especially, I mean, I love the comment that Eva made about Keith Brown, especially at a time when I trusted him. Yeah, because we all go into politics thinking, and I went in as a senior commercial manager with the oil companies, believing I was going into an organisation that knew what they were doing. The SNP at Westminster, the 6 of them, no idea how to manage people, no idea how to delegate. And I'm not saying that, and there's a nuance to this. It's not that there were stupid people, because they were not. But the mechanisms within political parties of control that I touched on earlier, they couldn't trust me to say what they wanted to be said about oil and gas, even though I could wipe the floor with all of them put together in oil and gas, because I wasn't guaranteed to come out with and toe the party line. And that's the reality of the situation. The reality check, folks, is only a fool trusts the current SNP management, or full-on supporters of the SNP. They are either dupers or the duped. They have not just lost their way, as Eva said, they have betrayed us, as I've been saying publicly for quite some time. But anyway, back to your original question. The first thing is to settle on a way or ways towards independence. And it's not a referendum in my view. Our people have been lied to and manipulated by the British state, as people all over Britain have been. Compare and contrast the contradictory stories on the same issues north and south of the border in the papers, depending on what story suits whom. And we're talking about the same papers here. Why is there no uproar? The same owners. Why is there no uproar from the public at large when the same publication tells contradictory stories in England and Scotland? The answer is simple. The uproar from whom? Exactly. When you control the media, then the media shall do as it is instructed, and expressly shall not echo the sentiments of a rational, free-thinking person, and thereby informing Joe Public that he is being lied to, or he or she is being lied to, or in simple playground terms, because that's what politics is all about, because these rules apply to Westminster. I've seen it myself, Holyrood, and politics in general. Why would the liar admit that he is lying? They won't. It's common sense, folk. We apply these lessons learned in the playground. They apply to human beings and human behaviour throughout our lives. So once we settle on the opinions or the options, and for me, one of them is not being a referendum, not in my opinion, or certainly not one where the mandate is that of a local election, as the rules that apply to local elections, and people need to remember this, are very, very different across democracies in the West than those elections where constitutional issues are determined. They are the ones that mattered. For example, if you're a student in St Andrews Uni, you're very unlikely to be Scottish, right? That's the first thing. You get to vote in local elections as you live there, and you pay tax and use local services, etc. Fine by me. There are very clear rules. Go and see, if you don't believe it, see the Electoral Commission website online and contrast local rules with general election rules or constitutional referenda around the world. So in constitutional matters, only citizens and the like can vote. So this is the same in constitutional referendums, whereas students cannot. And that's what we need. In most countries, you have to be a resident for 5 or 10 years before you get to vote on a constitutional issue. The same needs apply here, and we need to control our own decision making, not be dictated to by these shysters in London that we cannot trust. Jesus, if I've not learned anything, it has to be that we cannot trust these shysters. And remember, the majority of Scotland's immigrants are English. And the vast majority who came into Scotland in the 2014 election voted to remain British. So we must make sure this continuing trend does not deny us our freedom. I would remind you, just look at Wales if you want to understand how this will work out eventually, if you don't pay attention to it. I would therefore deny all immigrants the vote until they've resided in Scotland for at least 10 years.
I would go further. I mean, I've lived now here in Catalonia since 2016. I will never, ever, 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 ever get a vote. And I don't have a problem with that. That's quite right. I chose to come and live here. How dare I then say how they should live to suit my way? I've come here to enjoy their life. And that's the way it should be. But as you say, it's not just students, second homeowners, the people at Faz Lane, all the English sailors, British soldiers who are up here in secondment, people who are up in Aberdeen taking our oil jobs and all the wealth from there. They've got the vote. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But that's another story for another day. We'll be getting it. You're a blood and soil, whatever. Eva, same story question to you. What is the vehicle? What do we do? Because here's the other thing, Eva. While this is all going on, the SNP have admitted that we can't get Section 30. So that route's closed. Westminster's over. So therefore, plebiscite election sounds all right. But Alba, through our Ash Reagan here, put up this week, and not only the SNP, the Greens, the so-called, they voted against 125 votes to 1 against making this election at Holyrood a plebiscite election. So the SNP on one hand are saying we can't get a Section 30, that's not going to happen, but we're not going to do it through Holyrood either. So what is their plan?
Well, that was a valiant move from Ash Regan, but unfortunately it was doomed to fail. Not because it was without great merit, because it certainly was a very valuable exercise which should have borne fruit, but it was doomed to fail because of the sheer stupidity of the SNP leadership, who clearly haven't read their own website recently, because their policy on gaining independence, which I think they've probably not updated since July the 4th, the general election, was to use the general election for a mandate to fight for independence. And if that didn't happen because it wasn't recognised by the new incoming Westminster government, then should an incoming UK government continue to refuse the demands of the Scottish people to decide their own future, consideration should be given to fighting the next Scottish Parliament election in 2026 as a de facto referendum on independence. And a majority at that election for the SNP and any other party with which we have reached a pro-independence agreement will be considered a mandate to negotiate independence. So the SNP voted against their own stated policy. That's what they did. Interestingly, the website still says by the end of the year, the SNP will launch a Scotland-wide independence campaign, including digital and print assets aimed at increasing support for independence, and will work in partnership with yes groups and organisations and promote pro-independence voices from all sectors of Scottish society. So on that basis, Roddy, might I look forward to John Swinney and maybe Stuart McDonald joining us here in the next few weeks?
Much as I would love that, I would. I can't think how much we give me with such great players, but I think unlikely.
This is how ridiculous the situation has got. The SNP voted against Ash Regan's amendment because it came from Ash Regan of the Alba Party, and because they will never willingly support Alba, no matter how correct any Alba motion or amendment might be. They get advice regularly. I mean, it's not even weekly now, it's practically daily from Alex Salmond, Kenny McCaskill and others about what they should be doing. And often that relates to the independence question. Other times it's about poverty, and also obviously at the moment about Grangemouth and other economic matters, or energy, or, wind auctions, or whatever it is. It's all good, solid, sound advice, and they ignore the whole lot of it at their peril, and in so doing, they actually act inimically and contrary to Scottish interests.
They do. I say it. I go back. This show's called The Final Betrayal, because that's exactly what it is, Lloyd. But here's where Humza, one of our former First Ministers, a political giant in his own lunchtime, come up with this one. I actually said, I turned around to my wife and went, "Is this April the 1st?" She assured me it wasn't, but this is his solution, which is he to break the impasse. Humza is suggesting that we get a third-party country, to come in and negotiate with the United Kingdom about our constitutional position. I had to read it several times, Lord. Was he drinking? Have you ever heard such nonsense?
From Humza, lots and lots of times, but this really makes a biscuit.
Ask for that.
Instead of suing a nursery, maybe you should go back to one and start re-educating himself. This is, in some ways, what's most appalling about this is it shows that in the leadership of the Scottish National Party, they've had no discussions about the route to independence.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing could be clearer than the former First Minister saying, "Oh, we'll bring in a third party." The third party in this is the most important party. That's the people. There is no greater mandate. There is no greater power, which is why we seek an electoral confirmation, an electoral mandate to move our country to membership of the United Nations. The only people that need involved in that are our people. We do not need outside interference. Our problem is outside interference. For 300 and odd years, we've had outside, well, considerably longer than that, in actual fact, if you take into account all our real history with our southern neighbour. But the fact is, this shows the paucity of intellect that has been existent at the top of the Scottish National Party and is still existent at the top of the Scottish National Party. They are so inept, and Humza particularly in this statement is so inept because he has just said to us, we haven't been thinking about this. We had no plan, not even a secret plan. This is, if you wrote that in an essay for O-level modern studies, you get laughed out the room. It's a D- max. But how have we got to this place? And where are we going from this place? We've got rid of him. And then I had to witness, the next great star of Scottish politics on debate night the other night looking like a brownie. And I don't mean the chocolate sweetie. I mean one in a daft wee uniform with going dib, dib, dib. The fact of the matter is that we're being presented by the media with people who the media tells us are intelligent, they're important because they once got elected to something. In reality, these are people who, you ask them a question, they'll give you an answer. They don't think what they're saying. If they thought what they were saying, they would realise that they're consigning themselves to the stupid pages of the history books. I mean, it's beyond my understanding that the current leadership of the Scottish National Party cannot see that in their dotage, they'll be sitting at the side of the fire with their grandchildren. And the grandchildren will say to them, "So what did you do to get us independence?" And they'll say, "Well, I got elected to Parliament and I was on the telly and I got a column in the newspaper and that's about it." Have they no understanding that by being elected, by being part of the Scottish Parliament, reformed after 300 years, that they, each and every day, they are taking part in the history of our country and they will be remembered. And they will be remembered as being the cohorts of the Empress, now left us, Miss Sturgeon. And this current past 10 years is going to be looked at by future generations as a lost period. And lost by whom? Lost by Humza, by Nicola, by John, by Kate, by Jenny Gilbert, all of them. They are denying the people of this country a proper future because of their own inability to admit to their own weaknesses and frailties and stupidities.
Absolutely. I would pull you up in one or suggest, when you say that they give an answer, I would suggest the answer is usually written for them before they're asked by a SPAD or a civil servant. Well, you might be asked this. This is your answer. And then they stick to it, because if there's a supplementary question, they just repeat the same thing again. Absolute clowns. But talking of the Blessed One, the St. Nicola of Assisi. Now, when she was asked on the 10th anniversary of our near miss of independence, Did she take any responsibility for what happened since or whatever? Oh, you're going to love this film. You're going to love it.
Responsibility do you take for the result that the SNP suffered?
Well, look, I take my fair share, and that's a big share of responsibility given the positions I've held in the SNP, not just in my years as leader, but as deputy leader before that. I'll never try to evade that responsibility. But, I won every election I fought as SNP leader. The recent election, I wasn't SNP leader. So, equally there, are other sort of factors that have to be taken into account there as well. Clearly when any party loses an election, it doesn't exactly help them progress the objectives that they have. But I believe that support for independence remains strong. I mean, not just headline support, but you look underneath the bonnet of independent support and you find, amongst younger age groups, support at 60, 70%. The demographics of independent support are strong. So there is a need to continue to build the case, build the argument, have a degree of patience that perhaps we all haven't always shown over the past 10 years. And I've been, guilty of that as well, perhaps at times. Exercise that patience, build the case, win the arguments. You can't be certain about anything in life, but I'm as certain as I can be that Scotland will become an independent country well within my lifetime, and I mean well within my lifetime.
Exactly. No wonder your hands full. She was on. Well, I'll take my share of it, and I won't evade. But it's nothing to do with me, Gov. I won every election I stood in, and I wasn't leader when this all went south. And I had to show great patience. I wasn't showing enough patience. I was too anxious to independence. Did I miss something? Did I miss somewhere where she did something in the last 10 years?
We missed something in that we didn't catch on, and neither did Alex, to the fact that the only thing I'm certain of now is that she is a traitor to Scotland and its people. Traitor that she is, how much of a brass neck does this complete wido have? The evidence of her lying is plain for all to see. So go on YouTube, folks, and search for, I think the caption was something like 50 Shades of I Don't Know, for starters. Let's start there. Her denial, her lies, her patent lies. Anyone who studies amateur psychology can see it. She's a complete idiot. And the mandate she's failed to grasp the thistle on over her wasted 10 years in office. Chancing wastrel that she is. A traitor. We should run her out of this country. She has been given, she was handed the keys to a country of people who look after their own, who look after what's right, who live up to Scottish standards and expectations and people. Yes, we're quite an open people. We're quite rambunctious. We do argue and we have our differences. And I would liken us a wee bit to the wee free men in Terry Pratchett, which is and fair enough, it's a stereotype. But what we do is we speak plainly. Listen to that speech again, folk. Is there anything honest about it? No. You're a liar, Nicola Sturgeon. You're a traitorous waste of space. And the only reason she's getting presented is because the establishment still have their claws in her, because they need her to dictate to her minions that they need to continue with this line of bullshit that has been presented to the Scottish people, that the SNP somehow represent independence and the independence movement, which since she took over, they have failed to do. And then just look at the absurd policy choices she made at the behest of her imperial masters. Gender recognition instead of the right to self-determination for our people's future. For that alone she deserves to be punished. In days gone by, traitors' fate was simple. They would be executed. Thankfully, these are more civilised times. But the crimes are no less heinous. And yeah, sorry.
When you go.
Well, and then I look at this and just going back to Humza pitching. He actually went on to say that a third-party country should negotiate between Scotland and England. I mean, betrayal is Greek for politics. No, it's not. I just made that up. Politics is Greek for politics, right? But it's accurate nonetheless. As Lloyd said in their dotage, with grandchildren. Some of these people would be embarrassed for what they failed to do for independence. Sterilise these clowns. We suffer because of them. We don't need any more of these clowns. Anyway, enough.
Well,
It's
you're right,
anger management.
Here we are, 800 years on, and John Balliol is still known as the Toon Tabard, the biggest disgrace to Scotland ever.
No, she beats him. She beats him.
Till Gordon Brown come along, and now Gordon Brown and John Balliol are both going, "Oh, God bless you, Nicola. Thanks, love. You've got us off the hook," because she's the worst of them all. What she did was she was handed in a plate. Our independence was there within grasp. It still is, folks. But Eva, I'd like you to comment on what Nicola's thing, but also what is now what she did say in January 31st, 2020, more than ever. Because what we've talked about already is there is no plan, there is no idea, there's no got a clue. We desperately need unity and a constitutional convention. There is no other way to do it. And if we do that and do it quick enough and correctly, we can be independent very quickly.
If we do that properly and we use the right people, not individuals, and we don't hero worship any particular individual, and we make sure that that convention comprises elected politicians and civic leaders with a proven track record, dedication, integrity, honesty, drive, and imagination, there will be nothing holds us back. We're being held back now by the folly of the politicians, principally those in the SNP and the Greens that people trusted to head in the right direction. I trust Alex Salmond and Kenny McCaskill and those around them to head in the right direction. I also trust several people in the SNP, including particularly Alec Neil, Michelle Thompson, Philippa Whitford. I would have a special place there too for Angus Brendan McNeill. And I also believe that there are ex-MPs, including Phil, and ex-MSPs, including Lloyd, who should have a position there too because they've got a contribution to make that is a worthy one. And what needs hammered home every single day across the airwaves, across social media, in the shops, at workplaces, wherever it is the very fact that there will be Scottish pensioners who die this year as the result of cold and hunger. There will be drug deaths in Scotland this year, which are unnecessary. There will be alcohol-related deaths that are unnecessary. People will continue to live in substandard housing. Many of our children will not get the education they deserve. And as I touched on earlier, many of our adolescents won't get the mental health treatment that they need. People will continue to borrow from pension funds to get money to pay on a private basis for hip replacements, for knee replacements, for cataract operations. And it's not necessary in a land of energy plenty. And when you look at the potential of our nation and of our country, every single Scot that believes in independence should make it their beholden duty to convert one other, to turn up at the ballot box and to campaign when we get that electoral event. Do what Margot MacDonald said we had to do. We each persuade one. Now, given the statistics that we know that there's more or less at least 50% support for independence, we don't need to persuade as many to believe in independence. We need to persuade them to get up off their couches and come forward and do something about it. The people in Scotland that have the greatest potential to benefit from independence are the working class people who currently are without hope because their wages are pitifully low and their living costs are pitifully and unnecessarily high. Amongst that, housing costs and energy costs. These are the folk that need motivated to be on the electoral register and to get out and campaign and vote. And we need our politicians and our civic leaders to understand that those deaths of the pensioners that are unnecessary, the deaths and the privations that come from alcohol and drug addiction, from alienation, from health inequalities and from poverty, I will personally lay at the door of every individual elected politician who was there to deliver independence and failed so to do. They're on their watch and their liability, and it's time they understood that. And the people of Scotland didn't get angry. They just got up and did what they need to do to deliver independence and make Scotland the country we know it can be.
Indeed. Well said, Eva, as always, my friend. You know, we laughed at Humza's stupidity. I mean, it was just a classic, Lloyd. But at that point, the MP for Perth and Perthshire, hearing the stupidity, went, "Hod my beer." Because that half-wit Wishart, he says the BBC is great, big fan of the BBC, the British Broadcasting for Conservative Party and Unionist Party. He wants, not only does he love it, he thinks that post-independence we should keep it. So, let our oppressors remain in charge of broadcasting. If ever it showed something that they don't grasp, he doesn't understand, he doesn't have a clue who the enemy is, or not his enemy, but Scotland's enemy.
No, he doesn't have a clue. He doesn't have a clue about anything, Peter. I mean, he opens his mouth and lets his belly rumble, and then halfway through the sentence he thinks, oh, shit, if I say something bad about the BBC, I'll never get on Question Time again. Oh, they'll not phone me up to be on GMS on Saturday morning. It's all about feathering your own nest, which is, even before he was in politics, Peter was one for feathering his own nest. He's got things he claims, records he claims he played on that were made by friends of mine, and he was nowhere near the studio. He's a man who's got a real problem with the truth. But then again, are we in the least surprised? This is the man who wants to be in a band in the Houses of Commons. He wanted to be the speaker. I think in some ways, what Pete Wishart shows us is an attitude very similar to the attitude that his friend and mentor, Mr. Swinney, has, which is if you hang about the Ayrshire or the Perthshire Glens and you hang about in the shooting estates of Perthshire and that area, then your thinking gets a bit strange. You don't quite think the way you did when you went to Craigmount High School or Forrester High School when you're hanging about with the kids that all went to Oxford and Cambridge. And I think they're impressed. And Pete constantly has this, it's like the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder. But he's constantly got this wee Tory devil at the back of his head saying, don't say that, Pete, don't say that. You'll lose your seat. You'll lose your seat. It's pathetic behaviour. It's truly pathetic behaviour. But then again, we have Pete, and then along comes, I believe, a former holiday rep who's now being described as a veteran of the Scottish National Party. This idiot, Stuart MacDonald, bought and paid for by Vauxhall House, bought and paid for by the British-American Partnership, bought and paid for because they tell him that he's a clever boy. He's now suddenly become this guru who's going to lead the national movement to the place where Stuart thinks it should be, which is in a coalition government with the British Labour Party to run Scotland. How insane is this? This laddie, he's another one. He's like Pete. He's been to the House of Commons, therefore he now believes himself to be some higher form of species. And as a result of that, him, like Pete, comes out with utter and complete drivel. There's no rational way to come to the conclusion that Stuart MacDonald has done if you know anything about Irish history, British history, the history of the Labour Party, the history of Scotland, the history of the Scottish National Party, the history of Britain post-devolution, the history of Britain prior to devolution. The man is a half-wit at best.
Yeah, that's it, folks. Now, next summer holidays, when you go to Spain or wherever, get hold of your holiday rep and ask them how they think the Constitution of Scotland should be set up, because that's what we're talking about here. A wee redcoat, he was in Ibiza somewhere as a holiday rep, and suddenly he's a guru. He's a fucking half-wit. That's what he is. Phil, it came to it. We warned of this, that more and more that the SNP were becoming more and more like the Labour Party that we'd kicked out after 50 years. Stuart MacDonald is just summed up. We brought in too many people from there. He wants a coalition with the Labour Party. Is that betrayal? Is that a sellout? Can you get any more of a sellout than a so-called independence person suggesting a coalition with the British Unionist Labour Party?
No, it's absolutely appalling. Absolutely appalling. What a collection of folk we have. Stuart MacDonald, Humza, and Pete Wishart. Let's go through them. Let's go through it. Stuart MacDonald, advocating SNP Labour coalition post 2026. Treasonous. and one of many treasonous acts against the people of Scotland that this once holiday rep, who took up a different type of red coat when in Westminster,
Boom, boom.
especially the military aspect,
Yeah.
he committed a number of treasonous acts against the Scots. Sadly for me, as he was a friend when I was there, he is a bright and likeable young man, allowed his head to be turned by the establishment, and quickly, like so many others, became more interested in furthering his own career than freeing the people of Scotland from this union of unequals. This is your crime, Stuart. You failed us, and you must not be given the opportunity to fail us again. Strike him off. Get rid. Humza. Jesus, would you start with there? He was pitching for a third-party country to negotiate between Scotland and England. How thick are you got to be to think that that's a smart move? Maybe Pakistan? Another irrelevant clown that we must not forget to forget. Keep him as far away from decision-making or representation of the people of Scotland as we possibly can. A shyster of the highest order, and I do not trust him. A very good reason for doing so, but can't say publicly right now. But let's see if he pops up again in an attempt to represent the people of Scotland. Because if he does, like the rest of the current Scottish Government shysters, we should instantly engage in a game of whack-a-mole. Mole being particularly apt, since they're all turncoat gits. On to Pete Wishart, extolling the virtues of the BBC. Whack-a-mole. If asked on this answer, Jesus, whack this mole too. He's another mole. Look at his pick again, the haircut. I'm in Belgium, so heard ye's adventure of bin. Bin this chancer. Sorry, Pete, but politically you're a waste of time. Not relevant. Sadly, another man who's his head turned by the big machine is Westminster and should not be listened to. Do not countenance the bullshit that comes out of this orifice.
Absolutely. Well, he goes better than that. He didn't mess about here, Eva. Those things. But this was another one from Stuart, the red coat. He wants Scotland should help produce weapons for Ukraine. We've gone from being a party in our heyday when we were there of peace, neutrality, to backing NATO. You were wrong, Phil. You were wrong. To this, he wants us to produce weapons to help the fascist regime in Kiev.
I wish I was surprised, but none of us are, because we've watched this develop over a period of time. We saw Stuart MacDonald I don't know if he was one in the army fatigues or if he was only the one sitting at the desk with Alan Smith and Dave Dugan and the Union flag in front of them when they had a press conference in Ukraine a few years ago. So this is not a surprise. But I'm really pleased that Stuart MacDonald's looking across the water to Ireland, because does he seriously think that anybody in their right mind would look at Mary Lou MacDonald and Michelle O'Neill and, in a Pete Wishart context, the likes of Christy Moore, and ever consider that Stuart MacDonald, Nicola Sturgeon or Pete Wishart were fit to lick their boots? So there are lessons to be learned from the Irish, peace-loving, neutral country as they have also been, not members of NATO. But the lessons to learn from the Irish are not the lessons Stuart MacDonald thinks. They're very different. They're about standing up for your own country, talking about self-determination, building a case and building an international reputation, and perhaps most importantly these days, having an independent economy which is booming in comparison to what is happening in Scotland. So yes, indeed, be more Irish, but don't be more Stuarty.
If he was in Ireland, I think he'd be about kneecaps at the moment for such a thing. But he also said a coalition with the Labour Party would be a breath of fresh air, Lloyd. A breath of fresh air. It would be halitosis on Keith.
It would be it would be a disaster. I mean, here we're doing it now. We're giving airtime to this moron. The fact of the matter is, if anyone wasn't aware of how well played the young Mr. MacDonald has been, and he's not that young anymore anyway. The fact that his column is in the Spectator that has taken such a rightward turn that Andrew Neil has decided to pack it in. And he's leaving, is no longer the international editor because he says they're all mad. Now,
Jesus.
knowing full well that Fraser Nelson, that other well-known patriotic Scot, is the editor of the Spectator, and that he will not have truck with anyone whatsoever who believes at all in independence or the right of Scottish self-determination, but he's the best mates with Stuart MacDonald, tells you everything you need to know. Stuart MacDonald has been given a platform, and he's another classic version of one of these showbiz politicians that popped up round about 2017 in the Scottish National Party. A former member of the Labour Party, and someone who a number of years ago thought it would be entertaining when there was discussion in one of the Sunday papers that there was going to be a civil war in the Scottish National Party, long time ago. He put up a picture of himself in the uniform of the Spanish Foreign Legion, right? Saying, if there's a civil war, can I be in this side? What he effectively was saying was that he supported, because the Spanish Foreign Legion, as you well know, was the central part of Franco's army, fascist army that crushed the Spanish Republic. And Stuart MacDonald knew exactly what he was doing there because he knew it would wind up people from the left. And he got the response that he wanted. But unfortunately, in doing things like that, what Stuart has done is he's ingratiated himself in that horrible way that some, they were described by, I think it was Richard Brinsley Sheridan, the Irish playwright in the late 18th century, the Scotsman on the make, there is nothing more disgusting to see as it slithers along the pavement. Now, that's Stuart MacDonald. Stuart MacDonald says all the things that makes him get a pat in the back from those that he wants a pat in the back from. Stuart MacDonald loves the pomp, the circumstance, the whole nature of the British state, and cannot visualise himself not being a part of that. He cannot wait to get the ermine wrapped around his neck. I'd love to wrap the ermine around his neck and then hang it for a lamppost, which is what people in Spain would have done with him had he suggested some of these things at the time of the Spanish Civil War. But I'm kind of wildly off point now. But Stuart MacDonald is a dangerous man. He's dangerous because he's stupid and he's been given a platform. That feeds his ego, feeds his stupidity, because he believes that if he sees words that he's cobbled together in some salad or other on the pages of the Spectator, then he believes he, like Kate Forbes announced on television the other night, that he is an important person. He is not an important person. He is a danger to the people of this country. He was when he was an elected member, because he did absolutely nothing for the people of this country. And again, is another one who has paid the electoral price for failing to represent the people that elected him in the first place.
Indeed. As I've said for the last few weeks, and I'll continue to say it, Phil, I don't think the union's ever been weaker. This Labour government's already heading south. They're already massively unpopular. Our man this week, Starmer, has slipped in that many banana skins, and he's still getting a wee bit of a honeymoon period off of the media. But this just came out this week. I don't know if you saw this. They were given, this is the Labour Party. And that's the bit I've got to keep repeating, the Labour Party, the Workers' Party, the party of the left, allegedly, given £4 million from a tax haven-based hedge fund with shares in oil and arms. We're living in a crazy world. This would never have happened with Corbyn for sure, but with Harold Wilson or even James Callaghan or any true left of centre social democrat, would it?
Well, it should be no surprise, because remember, Starmer said he wants to clean up politics, but he thinks accepting 76,000 clothing allowance and 100,000 freebie box at Arsenal is clean. So why would this be a surprise? Why is this a surprise? Meanwhile, the Parliamentary Commissioner confirms no investigation into Starmer and his lapses in memory re-gifts. Quelle surprise. If you ever want to know that there's a placed man there, just check this evidence out. And we need to be careful with the definitions or redefining definitions, because that has been the game here for quite some time. It's embarrassing, or it should be. So when you say Labour, it's like, is the yes, is it even weaker? Has it ever been weaker? The Union has been in an appalling state since the neocons took over and put asset stripping of the country, and I'm talking about the UK, at the top of their agenda. They can see the game's up. They know that the West is in decline. They see the rise of BRICS. They know that they have been raping and pillaging for ages, and the game's about to be up, and the people are going to cotton on eventually. Before they do, they will get as much as they can out as quickly as they can. And for me, it's since Cameron, it's been in serious decline and remains extremely weak. We need to unite the movement, which means destroying the power of the enemy within. And that is the current SNP leadership. Starmer's just another puppet of the state. The Americanization of British politics we talked about, the two cheeks of the same arse. There is no difference. You can't even now get a credit card between the Democrats and the Republicans, and that is the same here, as you saw with that clip between Labour and Tory. The Red Tories. There is no way forward within the current system for the people. For the people, by the people means standing up and revolution. The current SNP leadership and everyone closely associated with it needs to be ousted. We need to rebuild it and rerun the Yes movement. The model is there. Simply recreate it. But also we discussed it many times before, but ensure our roadmap to independence is robust, with options, and out with the control of the enemies. And I'm talking about the powers controlling, and the within the British state. Because for me, a roadmap and any plan such as this, one of the greatest assets of human beings, the reason that we're still here is we're adaptable. So you set a plan down, you should have options, you should think out the scenarios, and you should have options for every given scenario. All the best laid plans of mice and men, Afghan Agli has been said, as we well know. So we really need the options, and to understand what the real opportunities are and what the risks are in the path that we choose towards our freedom and the freedom of our people. And then we need the courage of conviction to take them, and we need to convict those who stand in our way.
Here. Just on that whole thing, Eva, I just want to show, this is pre-election, of course, our Prime Minister.
In Britain, we must change ourselves. We need to clean up politics. No more VIP fast lanes. No more kickbacks for colleagues. No more revolving doors between government and the companies they regulate. I will restore standards in public life with a total crackdown on cronyism.
Go on, follow that, Eva. It's brilliant.
Right. This takes me back to a few years ago when I wrote an item for iScot magazine about the Panama Papers. And what enraged me was that probably two of my greatest heroes would be Jimmy Reid and Matt McGinn. And I wrote a few lines about how Jimmy Reid and Matt McGinn didn't dine out, in the greatest refinery and the crystal tableware and linen tablecloths, etc., as they were growing up. But they understood absolutely that every penny that was secreted away to Panama or elsewhere, and all the different parts of the world that in those days we thought Tories sent their money to avoid paying tax here and to avoid being caught out. Every penny that disappeared there that was not paid in tax to the UK Exchequer was theft. It was theft of the dreams of the children and the people of the United Kingdom that deserved better. It was theft, and it was dishonest, and it lacked integrity. And what it did was it meant that the people that paid tax and the people that paid their dues were the working folk that went to their work and paid PAYE and didn't have the ability or the wherewithal or the guile to send their money abroad. And now we see that a socialist prime minister has benefited from the self-same type of conduct to the extent where he's had his £4 million paid to his party. I had hundreds of pounds in my election campaign donated from people who don't live in the UK, and I sent it back. Hundreds, not millions. That's the difference between the big players and the wee folk that behave by the rules, because we know we have to and we know that's the right thing. And another thing, Keir Starmer's a lawyer. He knew perfectly well that if he was accepting hospitality or designer clothes from anybody, it should be, at the very least, declared. But as a socialist, shouldn't he have sent it back, Matt, return to sender, because this guy's no for sale? Because it's not just about what you do, it's about perceptions. We talk about justice has to be seen to be done. The minute that you look like you've been bought and sold, even when you've not, people believe forevermore that you have. It's that trust. It takes a lifetime to build and a split second to wreck. And he's wrecked it. He's ruined it for himself already. So have several people round about him. He's had to make statements and speeches about how he's in control, he's in charge, he knows what he's doing, which simply confirms the opposite. He's not in charge, he's not in control, he's made an arse of himself more than once, and by God does he know it.
Indeed. I mean, this is the latest one. This morning, he saw an old lady struggling with 2 heavy bags of shopping, and he immediately thought that she needed help. So he's halved the pension so that she now can only afford 1 bag of shopping. It won't be so difficult for her in the future. That's Keir Starmer's kind of socialism, you know. But we're coming towards the end. We're running out of time. A couple of things I want to cover on. But one of the other things that's definitely happened, I go back to my position that the union's never been weaker. The Labour Party, because of the winter fuel payments, they're losing members hand over fist. And that's why they're on this attack, Lloyd, of, oh, the Scottish institutions are terrible, you know, everything's bad. They don't want to talk about Wales, of course, but they are losing members. They're weak. We need to unite and get moving, Lloyd.
I don't think there's any question about that, Roddy. That's absolutely true. But, you know, Labour losing members is not the issue that it was some years ago. They've already lost so many members, and indeed the number of unions that are disaffiliated from them is growing apace and will continue. I think what's happened here is they've gone down what they believe is the lesson that they should have done under Blair. You get all the bad stuff done the first 100 days. And then you can ease up after it. Except what seems to have happened here is that they're doing some of the bad stuff, and they're doing some stuff that we perceive as bad, and they don't even understand why people think it's a bad idea. This is what's really astonishing about it. But just to go back slightly, he's come under pressure this week, and the centre of that pressure would appear to be that there appears to be some division within the Labour Party over the issue of his Chief of Staff, Sue Gray. She's a former publican from County Armagh in Northern Ireland. Well, and before that, she worked for MI5. And who she works for now, goodness knows. I mean, because I'm not sure, are you allowed to hold a position at MI5 while at the same time being the puppeteer for the British Prime Minister? I'm not certain about that, but Peter Oborne.
Prerequisite.
Peter Oborne has written some very interesting things about Keir Starmer, and the fact that Peter Oborne, being someone who's very firmly aware of the nature of the British establishment, the real British establishment, not the one that everybody thinks is the establishment. And when he described Starmer as the MI5 candidate, and then 2 weeks later, Sue Gray suddenly appears back from the pub in Armagh to become his Chief of Staff, it leads you to the thinking that maybe we are living in more of a security state than we thought. The fact that Starmer has been so committed in stating his support for Israel and his Zionism, the fact that he is someone who is happy to go ahead with the free ports, and he will not make any effort to help us out over Grangemouth. The real issue here has to be, who is in charge here? Do our votes count? Who put the leaders who put the leaders in charge? Who put the leader in charge of the Labour Party? Who put John Swinney in charge of the Scottish National Party? There's more to this than meets the eye. And I think what Peter Oborne is saying, and I believe, for those of you that are on Twitter, as someone called Vivian Oblivion has written a rather remarkable article on this, and I would have a look at it, because it's extraordinary that while Britain is becoming the 51st state of the United States, it would appear to be happening with the complete collusion of the British security services. And hence we find ourselves the pariah, not us, we are the Scots, but the British find themselves a pariah state in the world because of the committed support for the genociders of Israel and the homicidal maniacs of the United States. Where are we going?
I don't know. There's things we want to cover. I think maybe we're going to have to a midweek show, go Lloyd, because I really wanted to cover this week the exploding pagers in the Middle East. Because if this had been done by the Russians, say to American citizens, we'd already have World War III. The silence is appalling. Every nation should treat Israel as a pariah state. Would you buy any electronics that you know Israel's had their fingers in, literally? I don't think so. But the other thing that's annoying me tonight is that we didn't once have Phil on mute, because we had this ready, actually, to get it up there. So, but you didn't once have to be told you were on mute, Phil. So that's upset me. I didn't get to use that. So, folks, I hope you've enjoyed it. Did you see that? You didn't even see that, did you, Phil?
I did. I saw it. It was very nice. It was very accurate, I thought.
Well, it was the way you looked last Saturday.
I know. I've had worse days when I looked even worse than that.
The other thing I would like just a quick mention of is this. Well done to the people who stopped Flamingo Land developing our national park at Loch Lomond. Well done. And it just shows you the power of the people. When you get together, unite in a campaign, you can beat the man. And they did it down at Loch Lomond. We can do it, folks, for our nation. But we really do. I'm sick of saying it. We need unity. And of course, I'm going to have the culties on Facebook, the nutters, say, oh, well, you're always saying bad things about this Nicola and the SNP. Yes, I'm telling the truth. I'm telling you facts. I'm not making shit up. I've shown you her own words. Nothing to do with me, Gov, she said. We need unity, but we need honesty. And we need those two things. If we get honesty and unity, we can be independent in the next 12 months. We can, honestly, folks. So let's get unified. Eva, Phil, Lloyd, once again, thank you for your participation and your wisdom and your candour. It's much appreciated. And to you folks out there, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I do every week with my dear friends here and talking to you. And all the ones we met last week in George Square. Great meeting you all. And we'll hopefully see you again soon. You take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.